Yeah, so everybody, for those of you who are here, we're going to record this for everybody else. But this is Jonathan McKee. He's a guy that I read a bunch of his stuff. He's written 20 books. If you ever want to find out where I get information for your parent emails, it's thesourceforparents.com. And so you'll find out they're
That's
not
good.
my ideas. Um, he's wise, he's practical, and he has kind eyes. So pay attention, guys.
Oh,
This is Jonathan McKee. Here you
I,
go.
I never knew I had kind eyes. That's great. That's very cool. Well, I'm excited to be here. And Travis, thanks for hosting this. I mean, this is fun stuff. This is the heart of what we do is we love providing resources for parents and helping out. And it's kind of crazy times right now. So during this time, we thought it would be neat to try to, while Travis is actually enabling me as a host, so I can share some slides with you as well. This is a fun time where I'm going to be able to just talk with you guys and about kind of what's going on in these crazy times right now. But even before these crazy times, these are times where our kids are so connected to screens. Let's be honest, all of us are connected to screens. And so some of the biggest questions we have as parents is, how do we respond with all this screen time? How do we possibly interact with our kids instead of overreacting to our kids? So let's talk a little bit about that and what that looks like. And I thought we'd start by basically talking about teens and screen time in the meantime, and how do we actually, parent generation screen in a world so full of seclusion. I'm going to go back and forth a little bit with some slides and seeing me, but it's interesting because if we're looking right now what's going on in the world, we've kind of got a lot of young people stressed out, and I tell you, especially in this last week because of the racial tension and stuff that's going on top of now months of being secluded, it is starting to hit teenagers pretty hard. And we're seeing a lot of them that are kind of retreating to their screens to relieve that kind of stress. And they're spending all kinds of screen time. But it's interesting because most of the studies that are out there that are showing this is no matter how much screen time they're spending, it's not necessarily filling that gap. They're not like going, oh, good, at least we have screen time. That fills the void. They're actually going, wait a second, I miss face-to-face. Some of these surveys that are asking about that are observing several things. Matter of fact, this new study where they asked 13 through 25-year-olds about their moods right now, the top three results were frustrated, nervous, and disconnected. So it's interesting when you look at that and you see how young people are feeling about this right now. It's one of those times where I think a lot of young people are kind of looking for how to react. And sometimes you might even notice in the home that they're feeling a little more stressed out than normal. And so sometimes it's hard for us as moms and dads, because one of the things we have to do is we have to evaluate when our kids are kind of, maybe talking back, and not to mention, they're not at school all day. They don't have sports. They can't leave. Not that today's kids leave a lot. A lot of them just stay home and stare at screens anyway, but they're definitely home more than they used to be home. And so sometimes the tendency is for a lot of kind of flare-ups, and sometimes we as parents are like, wait, do we come down hard and discipline, or we show more compassion? What do we do? So one of the things I hope to really accomplish here in the next hour is to talk a little bit about where kids were with screens before this all started. And so we kind of understand what a lot of the experts are saying about how we respond with kids and screens. And then specifically, how can we respond during some of these kind of, let's just call them, strange times that are happening right now. So with that in mind, let's talk about that. I want to dive back into history a little bit. And as a matter of fact, I would actually like to go back to 2007, January 2007, because at that time, there was a guy who walked out on a stage wearing jeans and white sneakers, and he made an announcement that was life-changing. He said, basically, we're going to reinvent the phone. We're going to change history today. And that's exactly what happened that day. In January of 2007, he held up the first iPhone, and America loved it so much that within 5 years, the majority of Americans had this device in their pocket. And that same 2012, that's the 5-year mark. Not only do the majority of us have phones in a pocket, by the end of 2012, the majority of kids had phones in their pockets. And that's the same year that Snapchat came out. That's the same year that Instagram became a thing. So all of a sudden, social media is in kids' pockets. And parents, kind of got used to kids looking at screens a little more. Screen time shot up. An interesting thing that happened is now they weren't just texting, and they weren't then going home and plugging into this device in the wall. This device they carried around with them had, which by the way, now the most recent studies show about 89% of teenagers have this device. And so if by chance your 13-year-old says, but mom, come on, all my friends have phones, you could say, well, actually only 89% of your friends. No, don't say that. But 89% of them have these devices. And I tell you, they're carrying around this device that has access to so much entertainment media, so much connection. And as a result, young people just, screen time's going up, and adults tend to kind of hand their screens to young people because, let's be honest, they're a little more behaved when they have their screen in their hands. So the average age that a young person's getting a screen right now is, excuse me, a smartphone is 10 years old. And very often we just hand them, young kids, screens in the car. And so is it any surprise that kids still have screens in the car when they're getting older? And on campus is one of the biggest issues that teachers and administrators, if we have any teachers and administrators, raise your hand if you're by chance a teacher. Or yeah, this is one of the issues, and teachers are constantly saying, should we allow screens in the classroom? Should we fight it? Should we go with it? Should we tell kids to look stuff up? And even if teachers ban it, they find that kids are sneaking it. It's changed the way young people are living their lives, because now wherever they go, they are now documenting their lives like it's a live event. Now they don't enjoy the moment, they post about the moment. So it's one of those interesting things where it's starting to kind of take over to the point that the majority of young people actually bring their phone in their bedroom at night. I'm going to refer you to, as a matter of fact, Travis will punch a link there in the side chat right there for the sourceforparents.com. That's our free resource for parents. And we write articles about this stuff all the time. And in this article, Mom, I really need my phone in my bedroom, we cite study after study. And Common Sense Media actually did a study just a few months ago. And it shows that even though doctors for literally decades have been saying, hey, whatever you decide to do with your kids and screens, don't let your kids have screens in the bedroom. Despite that, 79% of teenagers aged 12 through 18 bring their phone in their bedroom every night. 79%. It's a pretty big number. And so we now have a lot of young people, they're posted on their screens all throughout the night. And we're starting to see some interesting stuff happen. One of the things that's happening is, as they're posting this stuff about their lives, one of the things that I think was one of the unforeseen things that Instagram and a lot of these social media companies didn't think would happen, and that is that once a young person posts something about their life, then there's this waiting period, and they're all waiting for the same thing. They're waiting for a like, and they're hoping that someone will like them, that will like their post. And because of it, sadly, there's this comparison thing that happens now where kids are like, hey, how come Christina got 187 likes and I only got 43 likes? And one of the things we've been seeing lately is, in the last just 5 years or so, we've been seeing this huge spike in depression. Suicide has spiked, particularly with teenage girls. And we're starting to see that this is really affecting young people, not necessarily all of screen time, but specifically social media. And I'll get a little more into that, where it's really affecting depression. And we've kind of seen this unprecedented spike in depression. And a lot of people were linking it to smartphone at first, but what's becoming more of a consensus that most experts are agreeing on is, no, ever since we've got the smartphone, now social media is falling around in their pocket. They've got it with them everywhere, and it's affecting young people. So the question is, how do we, as mom and dads, how do we, help parent generation screen? I mean, how do we, we've got this generation that literally is spending so much time looking at screens. What are some things we can actually do to make a difference? And I'm a big application guy. And so what I want to, talk about right now is, what are some things we can actually do? How can we respond? How can we not overreact? What are some ways we can actually interact with our kids about this? Because we don't want to be those parents that are freaking out all the time. And not to mention, it's kind of hypocritical because we really love our screens too. As a matter of fact, by most polls, adults actually spend more screen time than teenagers. We could talk a little more about that. So let's talk about what it is to actually parent generation screen during these interesting times. And what I'll do is, in just a few moments that we have together, let's actually look at 5 specific tips that I can give you about what it looks like to parent generation screen in a world of seclusion. So here's 5 specific things, 5 specific helps. These are things that have helped me. They've helped a bunch of parents. Maybe they'll be a help for you. And the first is get face-to-face in a screen-to-screen world. This is one of those things where it seems the more that researchers look at this, in a world of screen time, it's not that screens are bad, but when there's so much screen time going on, look for as many opportunities to get face-to-face as possible, whatever that looks like. Because sometimes that might be, hey, if your kids are distance learning, maybe sometimes get with them and talk with them about what they're learning. If they're having fun on their devices, instead of necessarily walking in and saying, hey, how much time was that on your device already? Maybe sit down going, hey, what are you laughing at? Can I see? If they're playing a video game, can I play too? During COVID specifically, I listened to a seminar last week that Common Sense Media put on. It was interesting hearing different psychologists talk about this. And some of the words they kept talking about, they kept using the words being present. And it was interesting, regardless what experts they brought in, I kept saying this common denominator was, hey, you know, and here was somebody who actually said, if you see this stress, buffer their stress by, and she didn't give you this list of tips of things to do necessarily, but just by being there, by talking with them through it, listening, using, you know, empathy 101. So a lot of it is hanging out with our kids in a screen-to-screen world, looking for these face-to-face opportunities. Looking for the times where sometimes as moms and dads, we're tired at the end of the day. Don't miss out that opportunity to put your kid to bed. Some of these basic things of just going in and tucking your kid in and having a conversation when their phone is on the charger because it's tuckered out because it's been used all day. Use those opportunities to talk with your kids. Use opportunities when you see your kids being stressed out like this. How can you actually sit down and dialogue with them and ask them, again, how can we be present and ask them questions? I love it how this expert basically said, hey, when you ask their questions, again, don't try to solve their problems, but show compassion, validate, and be present. This is kind of like, you know, this is like what you're basically, if you paid a counselor $300 an hour, this is really what they would do. They would do a lot of listening. They would do a lot of, I hear what you're saying is, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Empathy 101, being there. And we can do that simple step of doing that as a parent makes a huge difference in their lives. So look for opportunities.
Real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Just by way of clarification. I know we have a lot of parents on here who don't yet have teenagers, but they have little kids. Is that just as true for elementary school, younger kids as it is for teenagers?
Yeah, this is across the board because a lot of, as a matter of fact, when you read, I'm going to show you a study later here, when you read American Academy of Pediatrics, the advice they have with young kids, it actually is no screen time for kids up to 2, from kids 2 to 5, only an hour screen time a day. And then all the advice is be proactive with your kid about playing with them, interacting with them, hanging out with them. Now with teenagers, sometimes you get more of the conversations of hey, what's going on in the world? And they want to dialogue more and kind of maybe even almost seems like banter or argue. But young kids are noticing this too. So a lot of experts are saying, hey, it's okay if you want to watch the news, but don't leave the news on all day. It's stressing your kids out. Turn off screens. Again, it's not that they're bad, but don't just have the screens on 24/7. Turn off the screens and get some time to just be present with your kids. Mealtime is a great time to do some of this and hang out with kids. You know, lots of parents tell me, man, I can't get my kid to put down their screen. Well, guess what? Mealtime's a great time. They got greasy pizza in their hands. They don't want to have their screen in their hands as well. So look for these opportunities to get face-to-face in a screen-to-screen world. But tip number 2, create structure in a world of chaos. I think the word chaos right now probably is a good description of what kids are feeling this week. And what a lot of researchers are showing is that during this time when, again, here's the source for parents, Travis is putting that link there in the sidebar, and you can jump on, and there's that, you see that parenting help button right there at the top. You click there. We have all kinds of articles there that are free articles for you. And in this article, Young People's Screens and the Coronavirus, I talk about some structure. In fact, I was interviewed recently on Focus on the Family, and one of the things I talked about during this was, hey, how can we create some basically some solid ground during times where they feel like it's so shaky out there. And I talked about having a family meeting and sitting down with your kids. And when I say family meeting, it doesn't mean necessarily family meeting in the living room now, but maybe after dinner, just saying, hey guys, let's talk around the table. I want to hear from you, and doing some fun questions around the table. You know, hey, if you were to get a $200 gift card to any store, what store would it be and what would you buy? You know, some fun question where they get a chance to talk. You practice listening with them, and then maybe ask them some questions about, hey, what are your expectations during this summer now? Summer is going to be a little different because maybe there isn't summer camp. Maybe there aren't going to be some of the places that we've gone to in the past, like movie theaters or whatever. So what are some of your expectations? What do you see your day looking like? Talk with them, and maybe as a family, set some structure that you as a family agree on a little bit, because let's be honest, times have changed. Nielsen just put out literally a week ago this report about how TV has changed. And the interesting thing is, if you look at 6 through 11-year-olds and 12 through 17-year-olds, look at how much, this is the increase in TV at noon on any day. That's huge. And by the way, it's also interesting to me how both 6 through 11-year-olds and 12 through 17-year-olds, look how that number went up 9, 10, 11 p.m. A lot of kids staying up watching a lot of TV. So find ways to create structure in a world of chaos. And even if that is, you know, hey, you as a family, you guys like watching TV together. That's okay. TV's fun, and it's fun to watch maybe some family movies together. That's totally fine. But if you do, make sure that you say, hey, I'll tell you what, let's do family movie night, and find a movie that you guys can actually, everybody put down their own screens and watch screens together. So look for some things that you can do. But still, even, and by the way, Common Sense Media did a report. It's not just teenagers, it's not just adults who have screens. What they call tweens, which is 8 through 12-year-olds, right now are spending incredible amounts of screen time right now. So this is affecting families across the board. I just taught a workshop at MOPS, Mothers of Preschoolers, and you'd be shocked how much screen time 2 through 6-year-olds spend. So this is something that is affecting, you know, kids of all ages and parents of kids of all ages. So in that world, when we've got that happening, one of the best things that we can do also, if our kids are spending all kinds of screen time like this, is to not only, you know, create the structure, but also take notice of what's going on in their screens. If your 5-year-old, if your 8-year-old, if your 12-year-old is spending all this time on screens, it'd be good to know what they're actually looking at on their screens. And sadly, we live in a world where most parents, think about it, 79% of teenagers bring their phones into the bedroom every night. Most parents let their kids just kind of have free reign with their screens. They have no idea what's going on in their kids' screens. So if that's the case, one of the things I always tell parents is take notice what some of these apps are that your kids are using. You know, if your kids that are playing a game, again, it's not that you have to be some drill sergeant. Hey, front and center, now, screen. No, but maybe, hey, what you looking at? Can I play? The American Academy of Pediatrics talks about co-viewing, talks about sitting down with our kids and playing with them so we can see what games they're playing. Lots of grandparents and parents will talk to me about, my kid plays video games all the time. And I say, well, what games? And the answer I get almost all the time is, I don't know, because they're not sitting down and playing the games with their kids. So try that. Sit down and play the games with their kids. Now, I'm not here to tell you all screen time is bad, okay? Matter of fact, most of the research that's coming out right now is saying that context matters more than hours. In other words, think about this. During COVID, your kid might be on a Zoom call with a friend, or they might be being creative and building something, or playing a game that's a building game. That's not bad screen time. That's actually good screen time. But if your kid's sitting watching TikTok videos for hours at a time, that's not good times. Remember, social media is one of the things we're going to find out a lot that we really want to pay attention to. So know what your kids are doing on the screen. If your kids are Zooming grandma, that's not a red flag. If your kids are staying on Instagram and TikTok all day, that is a red flag. So know what they're doing. Let's talk about social media for a second, because the social media thing is one of the things that, again, literally in the last year, we're starting to see researchers more than anything else talk about this, because the pressurized environment it's creating for young people. And if your kids are on social media, let's talk about one thing right here. Let's talk about this thing called followers, because that little number right there on your kid's phone is changing everything. It's changing their physical safety. It's changing who they, it's changing how they feel about themselves. Because here's what's going on. That number right there, in a world where especially the majority of young people actually want to be an influencer now, and not just older kids. My friend Julie teaches third grade. She always does this star of the week thing where she asks kids, she brings one kid up a week and they're the star of the week. She interviews them. And she said she always used to ask them, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said the answer always used to be, oh, President of the United States. I want to train dolphins. I want to be a doctor, whatever. She says now, hands down, 8 out of 10 young people will say, 8 out of 10 third graders will say, I want to be a YouTuber. I want to be a YouTube star. And when I talk to most parents who have multiple kids, at least one of their kids has an interest, especially if they're spending a lot of time on screens, in being some sort of Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube creative, influencer. 86% of young people. So if your kids aren't in that, they might fall in that 14%. 8 out of 10 young people want to be an influencer. So what's that mean? Why is that important, Jonathan? Why are you telling us this? Because if you want to be an influencer, one of the most important things is that on your device, you got to get as many followers as possible. So you set your profile settings, as a matter of fact, so that you can get as many followers as possible. And again, this is the majority of young people. And how is this affecting young people? Well, now if their profile is set on public, and which, by the way, when you sign up for TikTok, for example, so if a teenager wants to be an influencer, you sign up for TikTok, it defaults as public. If you go to set it on private, it says, are you sure you want to set it in private? So these are things that sometimes parents don't know about. But if your kids, settings are on public, then anybody can friend them. And if you're a parent who actually says, no, I want you to be safe, I want it to where people have to give you a friend request. Well, then your kids will get friend requests and they'll say, oh, cool, here's a friend request from this guy. And they won't realize that they're actually getting a friend request from this guy. Yeah, I know, that's terrifying. I'll pull off that right now. Here's the crazy thing about this. We live in a world right now where the majority of young people are saying yes to that dude, whether they realize it or not. What are the ramifications? When you jump on Snapchat, for example, if your kid uses Snap Maps, which is this really fun feature where you can see where all your friends are at any moment, well, guess what? Now, creepy dude can see exactly where your kid is on a map right now and see exactly that. Because we live in a world now where when you choose to add location, which basically, if you on Snapchat and you're on Snap Maps and you've enabled Snap Maps, not a lot of young people have gone in and said, oh, let me turn Snap Maps to where only these certain friends see where I am. Again, most kids that enable Snap Maps just let all their friends. And who's included in all their friends? Ted Bundy. Because why? They want as many followers as possible, which is really weird because Ted Bundy's dead. But the thing is, this is kind of the culture that we've created. And where 20 years ago, the question was, do you know where your children are? The question today really is, who's following your kids? So we're seeing this change affecting young people because young people want as many followers as possible because, man, I got to have more followers because I want to be an influencer someday. And not only is this affecting their physical safety, the other thing that's really scary about this is young people are kind of basically now going around and they're living their lives where they're kind of investing so much energy and so much emotion in their social media that when they don't get as many followers as their friend, it's actually not, it's making them feel depressed about who they are and how come I don't have as many friends and how come I don't have as many followers. So we're seeing it not only affect their physical safety, we're seeing it affect their emotional safety. Now this happens on different levels, and one of the ways it can happen actually is not just, you might be sitting there saying, well, Jonathan, I've got a son and he doesn't have social media. We don't have to worry about Instagram. Well, maybe does your kid play video games? Because if you've got a 10 or 11-year-old who's playing video games and they've ever got a headset on, the question you should be asking yourself is, who are they talking to on that headset? And even parents that are very careful with who they're connecting with on that headset need to maybe ask themselves, is the person they're connecting with on that headset, like it's their cousin, they're allowed to connect with their cousin, they're allowed to connect with their older brother, does that person have their settings on private? Because if not, they could have in the same gaming room one of these creepy dudes. That dude I showed you the picture of could be gaming with your kid. So these are some of the things that we need to understand. And that's why, like in my book, The Teen's Guide to Social Media Mobile Devices, I talk with kids directly about this because a lot of parents aren't having these conversations. We as mom and dads need to start having conversations where we talk to them about this stuff. And it starts with us noticing what they're doing on their screens and starting to dialogue with them about it. Now, I realize a lot of parents, their first reaction is, well, what can we do? What rules can I establish? What blocks can I put on your kids' devices? Notice one of the things I keep saying is, how are you going to dialogue with your kid when they're spending this much time, soaking in social media? And the reason why is because we can put all the blocks on our kids' devices. And bottom line is, we've really got to equip our kids to make these decisions on their own. Just a note, I'm all for parental controls. I'm all for blocks. You're about to see in just a few minutes that I actually recommend you saying, sorry, you can't have your phone in your bedroom at night. I think rules are great, but rules without a relationship always lead to rebellion. And we need to have that relationship with our kid, and we need to be dialoguing about this. Parenting is as much bonding as it is boundaries. And if all we do is focus on boundaries and not bonding, our kids are likely to sneak out. And no matter how much we control their device, what's going to keep their friend from going up and saying, hey, check this out, and just handing their device? Kids can always have access to stuff. So we need to equip them how to make many of these decisions, because kids are spending a lot of time on entertainment media. And it'd be good for us to kind of know what they're doing and have some controls. Now, when I say pay attention to this kind of stuff, like, for example, our kids, as a matter of fact, let me share this with you right here. I'll jump on here. Boom. One thing that young people love is Netflix, obviously, and you can have it right there on your device. When it comes to something like Netflix, they obviously have access to all kinds of shows, and some parents don't even know how to set settings on those shows. It's not just me. Almost every expert out there is saying, hey, if your kids are averaging, and guess what the average is? 9 hours and 49 minutes a day for teenagers. For tweens, it's in, believe it or not, the 8-hour range, depending on how much screen time versus if you add in music and social media and everything. Lots of time per day. Your family doctor is saying, hey, if your kid's spending that much screen time, you need to give your full attention to what it is that they're on. So if your kid's on Netflix, for example, it would be good to have some controls. It'd be good to have the simple control of, don't let your kid have Netflix in the bedroom all night long. But you also can jump on their device, and you know that on Netflix, you can set the profile there, and you have to have a good password. So of course, this means don't have, the password 1234 or your anniversary or something, but you have a password they don't know. And then you could set these settings. And the other cool thing is, that you could actually go in and you can look at viewing activity, and you could see, because Netflix has got some pretty racy stuff. It'd be good for you to know, hey, what is it that my kid is looking at when they're in their room on their device? So you can use some parental controls to see what they're seeing, and also to prevent them from looking at some of that stuff. When it comes to the music they're listening to, now, of course, they don't have to buy songs. They can stream stuff. So it's good for us to know what they're averaging. By the way, the average teenager averages 4.5 hours a day on music alone. Americans love their music, and it's gone up since Spotify. So one of the questions we'll probably ask is, what do we, how do we possibly talk with our kids about this when they're spending this much time listening to, music at such a young age? And by the way, young people always tell me whenever I talk about music, especially when it comes to raunchy lyrics, because raunchy lyrics are so available today, because when you're downloading on Spotify, it's not like your kids are going, oh, let me find the clean version. Kids will always tell me, they'll sit there and go, well, I don't listen to the lyrics, I'll just listen to the beat. Well, every study out there talks about how the exposure to to the very sexual, sexually, charged lyrics that we hear out of the charts today. And if you look at the charts at any time, it's amazing to see how much of it is really sexually charged, because that's the music that seems to sell. Same with a lot of the shows. They very often will have that kind of stuff. And all the research just says, hey, man, that stuff is affecting our kids. So we should talk with our kids about that. So as parents, let's take notice of their screens, know what they're doing. We should be involved with them in their lives and know what's going on there. But not only that, here's where I'm going to really just pound probably this harder than any other point in the 45 minutes we're talking. And that is, when you get off this Zoom session today, sometimes the biggest tendency is to freak out. Some of you guys, I can see it on your faces right over there, your small little faces over there. Your tendency is to say, oh man, I'm going to check to see if my kid is looking at that on Netflix. I want to see what social media they're on, or, I never even thought about that. They have their phone in their bedroom, and you just immediately, you're going to line your kids up and be like, phones now. And what I just beg you to do is to think before you do that. Matter of fact, I would tell you, for sure, wait 24 hours before you do anything. I'd say, pray about this, think about this, talk with other parents at your church and say, hey, what are you going to do here? Do some research first, because let me tell you, as a parent who raised 3 kids, when I look back, some of my biggest regrets, and by the way, one of the books I wrote is If I Had a Parenting Do-Over. And I asked hundreds of parents one question. I said, if you could go back and you could change one parenting practice and you could do it over, what would you do over? And the answers were eye-opening. And if you could have heard how many parents talked about, man, so often I had good intentions, but I blew up, and I could see the look on my kid's face like, dad isn't safe, or I can't talk to mom about this, obviously. And realize, I'm not advising you let your kids do whatever they want. Not at all. I'm saying, think shrewdly about this and ask yourself, how can I respond in a way where I basically keep it safe, where my kids still will want to talk to me? And so for us, that's a huge thing, is not freaking out. Let me give you some specifics, because you might say, easier said than done, Jonathan. What's that look like? Well, if you don't freak out, first of all, delay your first response. I always tell parents, press the pause button. If your kid does something wrong, or you're worried about this, don't just go and go, I'm going to handle this right now. Don't do it tonight. Again, sleep on it. Think about it. Press that pause button. And then actually practice your first response. Practice what you're going to say to them, where you're going to tell them first, the thing you want to do more than anything else is you want to convey unconditional love. So maybe if you found out that they're looking at something they shouldn't have, or all of a sudden you found out that they were watching some shows that you didn't even realize, or you're now looking at the effects of social media and you didn't even know, don't walk in there and go, man, you guys have no idea. Instead, maybe just sit there and say, hey, you know what? I love you so much. I'd love to talk with you about, I went to this parenting workshop. We learned about some of this. I'd love to hear what you think about some of this. And immediately ask them questions and ask them what they're feeling about some of this stuff. Now, their opinion might not be very educated. It might not be very wise. It's like, I can do this no matter what, Dad, don't worry about it. It's fine. This game is awesome. I should be able to play it 10 hours a day, but hear them out and listen to them first. Don't freak out. Our tendency sometimes is to go in and just squash them. And again, remember, bonding and boundaries. Parenting is made up of bonding and boundaries. We can't just be that boundary parent. We need to think about bonding. And if all we do is we come in like a drill sergeant and just lay this on them, then we destroy one of the best opportunities we have, which is to be able to connect with our kids and talk with them. And that's where values are really passed on, is during bonding time. So make sure you keep bonding time open. And the way I say to do that is turn your overreaction into interaction. Look for ways that you can dialogue about this stuff. Constantly ask yourself, am I approachable? Would they come to me and talk to me about this stuff? Whenever I talk to kids about at like camps, if I'm at a middle school camp and I've got 11 to 14-year-olds, if we ever bring up sex and intimacy and relationships, and I talk with kids about this, kids will come up to me afterwards and they'll ask me R-rated questions. And one of the first questions I'll always ask them, I'll say, hey, have you talked to your parents about this? And the number one response I get is, are you kidding? And I'm like, well, why not? Because they'd freak out. That's what they always tell me. They'd freak out if I asked this question, you know? And I've got kids ask me, is oral sex wrong? What about this? What about that? And it's not so much that they're considering it themselves, it's that the entertainment media they heard is so deplorable nowadays that it's talking about all this stuff. And sometimes kids are just curious, what is this that I'm hearing about? And you got to ask yourself, would your kid go to you if they hear about, heaven forbid, if they hear about oral sex from some entertainment or from some friend or something, are they going to come up to you and ask you about it? Or are they going to Google it? It's a scary thought to think about. So ask, am I approachable? I love it. Dr. Meg Meeker says this, be authentic. If you walk in and you talk with your kids as though you're the adult and you love being there with them, they love that. Don't come down to their level. Stay up as an adult, because that will pull kids up. I love these words right here, that you love being there with them. Let me ask you that real quick. Ask yourself, do my kids know for a fact that I love being there with them? Ask yourself, when you walk in the room, are they like, oh, she's going to check my screen time. She's going to say, how much time is on the screen? Or do you ever just plop on the floor and go, oh my gosh, tell me about your day. What's the best thing that happened this day? You know, what's the worst thing? And by the way, if you've been a disciplinarian in the past, it's not too late. You can plop on the floor and talk with your kid. Realize at first they're going to be totally skeptical. They're going to be like, why? What do you ask? What? What's the matter? What's wrong? They're going to do some of that. It might take some time, but ask yourself, do they know that I unconditionally love them and I love being with them? So don't freak out, whatever you do. And by the way, in this book, I have 2 out of 7 vital changes I'd make. 2 of the chapters are about how do we not overreact? What can we do? Because that was such a huge mess up that parents shared that they wish they could do over. So don't freak out. And number 5, let me leave you with this step so we have plenty of time to talk and do question and answer. And that is move from reactive to proactive. And what I mean by that is very often we're reacting so much, and especially as our kids get into middle school and high school, we find ourselves busting them for this or that. And the reason why very often is because we didn't necessarily have a bunch of boundaries set. So our kids are constantly getting into trouble, and all we're doing is putting out fires. So far today, a lot of what I've talked about is how we can be relational. We've talked about this bonding time. Matter of fact, some of you might even be suspecting and going, hey, this guy Jonathan sounds like he's almost like some California hippie who's like, let your kids do whatever they want here. All he keeps talking about is bonding. Come on, you can't let your kids do whatever they want. Well, let me be very, very clear. We need to not let our kids do whatever they want, because then we're just going to end up being reactive. We need to be proactive about talking about some of this stuff. And a lot of that is through setting helpful boundaries. And let me tell you specifically about this, because there's all kinds of research out there and people are debating, what screen time is too much? What's this look like? So let's look at some of this. First of all, let me just tell you, it's okay as mom and dad is to say, for you to be able to say, sorry, you're not gonna have your phone in your bedroom at night. If there was only one rule I could have with my kids today, it would be no screens in the bedroom at night. That would, if I could just have one rule, that would be the one. It's one of the things that almost every single expert out there agrees on. And it's interesting because when you start looking at a lot of what the experts are saying, and you find out what age they let their kids have phones, and let their kids have, and whether or not they let their kids have phones in the bedrooms, most of them say, no, absolutely no phones in the bedroom. So let's talk about some of these boundaries here. We're talking about bonding and boundaries. What are some of these boundaries here? And especially when it comes to screen limits, because it's probably one of the biggest questions I'm asked. Yes, no phones in the bedrooms, but what else, how much game time is too much? How much Netflix time is too much? My kid sits and watches YouTube videos all day. Kids 6 and 8 years old, it's one of their favorite things to do is watch funny YouTube videos. How much YouTube videos is too much? Well, it's interesting because we have these nice little things on their devices where we could set time limits and stuff. And a lot of parents are like, should I just set a 2-hour time limit? Is that what's good? remember what I said earlier, that not all screen time is created equal. Um, but when kids sit in front of the TV, sure, absolutely. Your American Academy of Pediatrics, they set rules long time ago, and they keep updating them every year. But they'll say with young kids, they actually say 2 to 5 years old, 1 hour a day. Matter of fact, under 18 months old, you'll see above there, no screen time. But when they're finally 18 to 24 months, or if they pass 2 years, you could sit down with them. But for 2 to 5 years old, an hour a day. How's that for a screen limit? So for young kids, they're pretty strict. For ages 6 and older, they talk about, hey, be consistent. Again, this is some of the structure in kids' lives. Well, what about when your kids get older, when they get to be middle school and high school? Yeah, high schoolers average 9 hours and 49 minutes a day of entertainment media. And you're sitting there going, wow. So, I mean, should we limit this? What do we do? Well, there's been so much debate about it that, and a lot of researchers like Dr. Jean Twenge, she has this book called iGen, and they actually there was so much argument. She was sitting there saying, hey, you know what? Screen time is affecting kids big time, and we need to do something about this. We need to, parents, stop arguing about this, do something about the amount of screen time your kids are spending. And she actually did some research where it showed no more than 2 hours a day, because anything above 2 hours affects their mental health. Smartphones are specifically one of these culprits. And a lot of people were pushing back her research. And I happen to agree with her research, but it was interesting because you always, as with everything, it almost seems to turn political. And people were saying, no, you can't generalize all screen time to be the same. So the interesting thing is, with all this debate and all these researchers literally arguing how much screen time is too much for our kids, the interesting thing was these two researchers, Jean Twenge and Jonathan Haidt, they posted an open source document and said, okay, researchers, post it. We want to see it. Bring your studies here. Let's all talk about it. And the interesting thing was they did. And this, as you can see, it was first posted in February, and they last updated it this month. So this is current stuff. And what happened is when they posted this open source document, they said, here's the question: does screen time affect mental health? Because we definitely are seeing this mental health crisis. What are you seeing? And basically, for a year, all these researchers argued about this stuff. Well, they finally agreed. They said, let's look at what we agree on. And I want you guys to see this here, and then we'll bring it up to questions. Here's what they agreed on. 2 things. 1, there really is a mental health crisis engulfing adolescents, particularly girls, in all the major English-speaking countries. So, huge thing. Yes, this is not a myth. Young people are suffering, specifically girls. But why? Number 2, the evidence linking screen time to mental health problems when you combine both genders together is actually weak and inconsistent. But when you limit the analysis to social media effects on girls, the link is much stronger and surprisingly consistent. So the one thing they all agreed on is social media is affecting our young girls big time. So they actually put some recommendations out, and they said, first of all, delay when your kids get social media accounts. Wait till high school. High school. That's what most of them said. And by the way, if your kids go to get Instagram or TikTok or Twitter or any of the things before they're age 13 anyway, do you know that Twitter will say, sorry, you're not old enough? And your kids would actually have to lie about their age. That's because FTC has this thing called COPA, Child Online Privacy Protection Act. So literally, if you're letting your 11 and 12-year-old do it, they have to lie about their age anyway. So it's kind of a no-brainer to say, sorry, you got to wait till you're 13. But most experts are saying, wait, this kind of pressure, don't even put it on your kids until high school. Then they're saying, talk with your kids about the dangers. Instead of just block their phones, talk with them about this. And then they're saying, put tight time limits on their social media. And then they went further to even say school districts should start talking about this so there's not so much pressure there. I'm telling you, there's so many reports out there from all these experts about how loss of sleep from kids staying up and having their phones in their bedrooms at night and screen time is affecting their impulsive, their impulsive behavior. And they're finding that the 2 biggest effects that's affecting kids acting out is sleep and screen time. So it's interesting when you start looking at all this different stuff. So the realistic boundaries I always tell parents is limit screen time on social media. Parents, you got to have the passwords. It's got to be passwords that they don't know if you're going to try to limit these. Delay screen ownership as late as possible. Most experts out there are saying till high school. And by the way, they debate about this stuff all the time. People ask, like, this is the CEO of Common Sense Media, what age? And all of them always say the same thing. They say the later the better. And it is funny. CEO of Common Sense Media, high school. Bill Gates, high school. So delay screen ownership. No social media till age 13 because of COPA. It's affecting young people big time. And no devices in bedrooms. So these are the boundaries that I kind of say, hey, if you're talking with your kids about this stuff, it's still good to have some boundaries like this. And I encourage you to take a screenshot if you want right now. It's okay. You can, if you got a Mac, Shift, Command, 3, boom, screenshot that right there. And also the video will be on your site there. But these are the things we need to dialogue with our kids about. We need to not just have these as boundaries. We need to talk with them about it. Because let me tell you something, when you got a 16-year-old or 17-year-old, the thing you got to start thinking about is looking at that calendar. Because your kid's going to be 18 years old someday. And when they're 18, they could be in an army barracks somewhere. They could be in a college dorm somewhere across the country. And at that point, chances are they're going to be making these decisions on their own. They're not going to call you up and say, Mom, can I watch the new show on HBO? They're going to make that decision on their own. And the only question you have to ask yourself is, did I equip them for that day? Rules don't raise our kids, but our relationship with them and these conversations, talking with them about this stuff, are a huge help. So I encourage you. As a matter of fact, I've got some tools that'll help you there. And Travis will put a link on the side. As a matter of fact, I will share here. Let me share the screen here. I'm going to share my, where is it? Here we are. I'm going to share Safari with you. I've got a brand new book coming out that's a great one to help interact and talk with your kids about. And it's on my Amazon page. And I think Travis is putting a link for my Amazon page right there in the chat right there. This is a book that my daughter and I wrote together. And it's about face-to-face connections in a screen-to-screen world. And the cool thing about this book is that it's made for a young person. It's made for that tween or teen. But at the end of each chapter, there's discussion questions. So it's the type of book where if your daughter wants to be on social media or whatever, you could say, well, tell you what, let's go through this book first. And then, and let's meet every week for breakfast. Now, all of a sudden, you're getting that connection, that time to interact and talk, but you're talking about this. Now, if you go to the page that he linked there, my author page, you'll see several different books. Here's 2 books for guys: The Guy's Guide to God, Girls, and the Phone in Your Pocket. The Guy's Guide to the 4 Battles Every Young Man Must Face. Those are great for going through with guys. This book, The Teen's Guide to Social Media, I'll click on that one right there. This is currently out. As a matter of fact, I've got it right now. And this book is what Doug Fields actually called the phone contract that parents should use. In other words, if your kid goes, I want a phone, Mom, you can say, okay, let's go through this book. And once we're done going through this book, then we'll talk about you having a phone. Because this book right here talks about, what are you posting? Who are you connecting with? What are you streaming? What are you gleaning from your self-esteem from what you're posting? It has all these different conversations. What about Snapchat? What about all this different stuff? So look for opportunities to dialogue with your kids about this stuff and talk about this, because this is what it's like. I mean, parenting issues a decade ago were completely different because social media wasn't something they carried around with them. So now parenting very often is parenting generation screen. And if you've got a kid 6 years old or above, these are the realities for parenting right now. So let's spend some time, and I'll take some questions here, and we'll go as long as we need here. So Travis, why don't you navigate? And here's what we'll do, because I know a lot of you guys are on mute. Those of you guys who are in, who have your name posted up there, we can't see. I was gonna say, if we can see you, put your hand up and we'll call on you for a question. And I see a hand right there from the coolest name in the world, Sandy Beaches. And then if we don't have, if you aren't being seen, go ahead and write in the chat box, and Travis you go ahead and call and say, hey, we're gonna let so-and-so make, so Travis, you navigate who's asking the questions and unmute them, and I can dialogue with them, and Travis, you choose the next person. Sound
Yeah.
good?
I see Jared Sadolski. You got a question. Go ahead, buddy.
Hey, Travis. Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
You can.
So fantastic information. Thank you so much. You've brought important issues to light. One thing that I wanted to mention, because we're a Florida-based audience, we're number 3 in the United States for human trafficking. And I suspect that there's a connection between adolescent social media use and human trafficking. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, in that book, The Face-to-Face Connections, I end up talking about that several different times, because when I do school assemblies, it's one of the subjects we end up talking about. Sadly, in a world where young people want followers, that most of them are leaving their profiles public. This is, a pedophile's dream, because basically pedophiles know that they can go now to Instagram and TikTok, whatever, and a lot of young people today aren't blocking. It used to be, honestly, even just a couple years ago, if you go to Instagram, a lot of the profiles were private, and you'd have to send that friend request. So a lot of pedophiles were coming up with these phony, pictures and all this to try to become friends. Now it's so much even easier, because you don't even need to request anymore, because kids are just leaving their profiles public, and you could just, boom, just start following right there. Something like TikTok actually has basically TikTok's made to where whatever you're viewing, TikTok's smart enough to say, hey, guess what? I'm going to let this guy see more of what he's viewing. So if one guy likes little girls dancing, TikTok's going to show him more of little girls dancing. So it really is one of these unique situations where all of a sudden we're starting to see a lot of DMs, direct messages, from these guys saying, hey, good dancer, and for sex traffickers, that's a whole different level than just a creepy pedophile sitting in his basement. The sex traffickers are the ones who are absolutely saying, hey, I'll tell you what, let's meet. And this is scary. I was just at a Youth for Christ in small town North Dakota, where you think it might be a little safe. They went on a trip to Minnesota, and when they were there with the kids, one of the things they had to do is they had to have their chaperones sleep in front of the doors, because the kids had met people on social media and wanted to sneak out of the hotel room and go meet up with this cool guy they just met. And this is the reality of so many young people think, oh, I want to meet this person. It's fine. And they don't realize, and story after story, as a matter of fact, in that face-to-face book, I tell several different stories of young girls who showed up and it wasn't somebody who they thought it was. So absolutely, Jared, huge reality. And we need to teach our kids to recognize some of these predatory behaviors. And I actually go through a bunch of them in that book and say, watch out for these predatory behaviors, because, and a lot of young people need to start thinking about actually setting their profiles on private and thinking about who's going to follow them. So it'll see if this influencer thing stays as strong as it is right now, because 8 out of 10 is a lot of young people who want anybody to follow them. So I hope that changes, because it's dangerous for the sex trafficking thing.
All right. Who else? Go ahead, Sean. Go ahead, Sean. I can't unmute you. You got to do it yourself.
FYI, we are not technologically savvy, but go ahead. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Hey, so, different kids have different personalities, and we tend to have our oldest kid is kind of not that into social media and not that into all the various seemingly pitfalls at this point in his life. Although our youngest is probably going to be a nightmare in that regard. But my question is, the boundaries and things like that you set, is that still I know it's appropriate, but is that as essential if there's a personality type that isn't as drawn to those things, or is it something, go ahead and do it as a precautionary?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's one of those things where, everything's within balance. All the research, and again, in 45 minutes, trying to show you what I can, where there used to be a lot of research, like as you saw, Journal Pediatrics used to say, under 2 years of age, 0, 0 to 6, only 1 hour a day. And then a lot of people were saying only 2 hours a day, only 3 hours a day for teenagers. And again, there was a lot of pushback saying, why? It's not bad if a kid's Zooming grandma, right? We talked about that. Well, we do have to keep in mind that when kids, as a matter of fact, I'm going to share screen as I talk about this right here, that when kids are, can you see that article right there? Sitting around right there. Okay. What we are seeing is we're seeing that if kids end up just gaming all day, or if kids end up sitting watching Netflix all day, it does affect them. I mean, everything needs to be, in moderation. Matter of fact, this article, one of the things that I thought was really interesting was, look at this right here. Researchers tracked the children who wore these accelerometers, and it found that, the study found that every extra hour of daily activity helped lower depressive symptoms by 7.8 to 11%, depending on the age of the child. So some of the things that we see is that if a kid ends up just gaming, all the hours of the day, or watching Netflix and stuff, that there's all kinds of risks from, and actually, I'm writing a book for Focus on Family right now called Parenting Generation Screen. And I have a whole chapter on screen time and a whole chapter on social media. And in that, we talk about, hey, what are some of these limits? It's hard to say, every kid, here it is, 2 hours. I wouldn't go that far. But I think we as parents need to be tuned in with our kids and see. And if we see a kid where all he's doing is gaming and never getting outside, all they're doing is sit. If your daughter sits down and starts Parks and Rec and watches 2 seasons in one day and never goes outside, it might be fun to do. Honey Maria is saying yes. It might be fun to binge once on a Saturday, but if this is her daily thing, risks for obesity, depression, all kinds of stuff. But great question, though. Was it Sean? Because what you're saying, and if it's not Mike, whatever your name is, the cool thing is some of these things like no phones in the bedroom, and us as families having good family interactive time, and we as families having no tech at the table, where we all leave our devices. Those things alone are going to keep, most kids are out of control with screen time, have their phones all night. Mom and dad are ignoring them. They're spending as much time. If you're in your kids' lives, you're aware of what they're doing. You yourselves are modeling this. You don't have tech at the table. They don't have their phones in their bedrooms. That alone is going to be such a great start towards this, that you're going to figure out, hey, I think for my son, 2 hours a day on video games is good. For my daughter, a couple hours on Netflix is good. Even if it's not going to make them more depressed, I just don't want them sitting on their butts all day, So those are some of the decisions you'll make, where I won't give you one broad stroke of 2 hours is the number. Does that help? Cool.
We had a question come in on chat, and it was from Jason. He wanted to know, can I use Xbox time as a reward?
Yeah, you know what? I think, and it depends and it varies. Again, if you see a kid showing some addictive behaviors with Xbox, I would be careful. It is interesting how much debate on video game stuff. People get heated about the video game thing. And there's actually some studies about this disorder that you can have where, gaming too much. So I would watch for some of those tendencies. Most experts agree not before bedtime, because it actually amps you up. Gaming, like social media, and like, I hate to tell you this, like porn, all are big dopamine things where they kind of like your anticipation for the next thing. And with games, your anticipation for the next level. So it amps you up a little bit. So they say don't game before bedtime. Same with pulling the slots or doing cocaine. It's one of those things that you get amped up like that. So they say don't do it right before bed. And if you start seeing that a kid is sacrificing friendships, family time, getting irate when you tell them to get off games, then it's time to maybe put on some of those controls. But if not, if you're saying, hey, during summer, hey, you did good, you can play some games, I'd say sit down and play games with them, and monitor what games. Don't be like, oh, here's the nice new Grand Theft Auto you wanted to play. I don't know what it is, but enjoy, have fun clubbing prostitutes. It'd be good for you to know what Grand Theft Auto is. And yeah, believe it or not, you actually do that in that game. So, but no, I think it's okay to reward them with game time, and it could be fun. Just watch for some of those warning signs.
Who else has a question? All right, I'll ask one. Which social media do you start out with? And so if you say, okay, you're allowed to start in the social media world, here's the safe-ish one.
Well, it's hard because which one do they want, right? No kid wants to be on Facebook because that's where grandma is and that's where mom is and whatever, and they don't want to be social media embarrassed. It is funny how kids will end up getting Facebook anyway, but they'll whine about it and say I'm not on it. Most likely, I mean, I'd say the hottest social media right now that kids want to be on is TikTok. I'd spend 5 minutes on TikTok yourself. I think you'd want to wait till your kid's 15 or 16 before they get on TikTok. It can be pretty raunchy, a lot of curse words, that kind of stuff. Instagram can be one of those ones that, hey, it's just posting photos. The thing you got to be careful with Instagram is Instagram's one of those ones where boom, right there, how many followers, how many likes, and we see a lot of kids posting something and immediately the comparison game. How come she got this many likes when she showed a picture of her cat and I showed a picture of Fluffy and I didn't get as many likes, and well, it's because your cat's name is Fluffy. But the thing is so you guys start thinking through these things and watching for that, because that's one of the dangers. The CEO of Instagram actually in this last year tried in 7 different countries, basically as a trial to see if he was going to do it, where other people can't see how many likes somebody else has. And a lot of people were getting mad. And it was interesting. The people who were getting mad were like Cardi B and Nicki Minaj and kind of these profane rappers. And I was like, so what if they get mad? Anyway, but they were like, we're going to go somewhere else. And it was interesting. I wish he would have done it because it's creating a pressurized environment for young people. So I don't want to say Instagram's a great place to start because I don't like social media at all, but I think Instagram, our kids are going to want to be on social media. And if their friends are on it, if you said, hey, let's look at it together, let's talk about this. And then immediately I'd talk about setting things on private. And that's why in this book, I would say, well, let's read this book first. And I would go through it. I'd read, or the new one that my daughter and I wrote, where we talk about, my daughter actually in that book, while writing the book, she poured her soul out and confessed about this day that happened to her where she was just literally sobbing because of the comparison that was happening. And she goes, I'm quitting Instagram for a year. And she right there in the pages said, I'll do this. You can email me about it if you want to do it too. I challenge you. Quit it for a year. I'm not saying it's bad, but and she just laid it out there. I think it's good for young people to hear those kind of stories and think through the ramifications of the comparison games that can be played. So I'd be very cautious. But at the same time, if you ban your kid from everything, they're going to sneak. And when they turn 18, they're going to download everything. So I think it's good to listen to them, empathize, hear what they want, don't just throw them the keys to the car. Say, okay, if you want to, let's sit down and let's go through the driver's ed manual, and let's talk about it. And when you are showing this kind of maturity, let's let you drive. So maybe Instagram might be that one.
Yeah, we have kids whose parents have banned them from social media, and they just have an account on their friend's phone. And
Absolutely.
so as soon as they get to school, they just use their friend's phone for that. So yeah, if they want it,
happens all the time. And parents are like, not my kids. Craziest thing was in my own church. I'll say this. Wait, you're recording it. Are you posting this? Oh, I'll say this. I worked with middle school kids and I was friends with lots of the parents. And I would teach a workshop like this and parents would come up with me and be like, I'm so glad my kids don't do that. And I was all, because I worked with their kids and I saw their kids on that app last week. It's a struggle.
So this is I know we're running out of time, but let me squeeze another question.
That's okay.
What do you do when you have some bad habits as a parent and you want to change it, or your kids have some bad habits that they've started and you think, is it too late to have an effect?
I think it's good to start with an open, honest dialogue. I would do that, call the family meeting, but don't call it a family meeting. After dinner sometimes say, hey, I was reading this article about screen time. And if you jump on thesourceforparents.com, as a matter of fact, let me show you, it's a good place to start here and we'll go there. Share screen, boom, share. Okay, can you see my Safari right now?
Yes.
I think you can. Okay, I'm gonna go to the Source for Parents. Let's go there so you can just see it real time. Okay, you see the Source for Parents? Here's that button right there that says Parenting Help. If you click there, all these articles, look at 3 phrases not to say to your kids in crisis, new stuff about TikTok, new stuff about kids wanting to be an influencer. So you could sit there, and if your kid wants to be an influencer, you can read this article. Oh, it opened up a new one. That's kind of interesting. Can you see the Mom, I Want to Be a YouTube Star now? Why is it being weird like this? I don't know why it's doing that. Why isn't it opening on this page? There we go. It opened on this page. Now you can see it. It's funny how sharing a screen does it different like this. But you could read this article. In this article, it talks about a lot of really good facts about what are the odds of your kid actually being an influencer, but don't crush their dreams, and talk with them about this. So you could read an article like this, and as you read it, you could then, when you're done, you could say, hey, guess what? I just read this article. What do you think? Look at this. And you could read a paragraph, read some stats, and say, what do you guys think? And listen to what they have to say. Talk about it. Be vulnerable with yourself. I think I'm spending a lot of time on my screen right now. Do you ever feel frustrated? Like, you want to talk with me and I'm on my screen? Again, be that approachable parent. Create a climate of comfortable conversation. Hey, nice use of alliteration. Where where your kids feel like, hey, I can talk with Mom about this. I can talk with Dad about this. And the more you listen and show empathy, then it's okay for you to, after you talk about it, say, hey, let's dialogue about this more. And then say, eventually, hey, you know what? I've decided that I think we're all going to turn our phones off at night and put them on the charger here. And we're going to charge them in Mom and Dad's bathroom at night or whatever. And kids are going to have fits, if they had them in their rooms. It's okay for you to do that. But don't just go in and drop that bomb tonight. Start by dialoguing with them about them, listening, read an article. I've got an article on the sourceforparents.com about phones in the bedroom. I've got a whole chapter in here about phones in the bedroom. I got a whole chapter in the new Face-to-Face book about phones in the bedroom, where it asks discussion questions. What do you think? Is that a distraction to you? Is that something, in this book for young guys, The Guy's Guide to 4 Battles, it talks about the temptation of pornography. And I spend multiple chapters about that. And I challenge kids. I say, hey, guess what? Go up to your parents and tell them, I don't want my phone in my bedroom. In a world where 72% of young men admit to on purpose seeking out pornography each month, 41% of young Christian guys admit to it. 13% of Christian girls, 41% of Christian guys. It's a huge issue for young men. And it's one of those things where we can talk with our kids about it. And instead of coming down and busting them or whatever, say, hey, let's talk about what fleeing this kind of thing looks like. So open up those conversations, start with bonding, and then it's okay to place some helpful boundaries. Does that help? Any other questions? I could take one more question if you want.
Go ahead, Sean. The real Sean, not the Aaron Sean. You got to unmute yourself. I don't know why it's not letting me unmute. Go ahead.
Unmute. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I know you kind of sort of hit or miss the social media age of starting off somewhere around 13, I think, because that's the legal age, I guess, for some of them. What about phones in general? Like, I know that's probably a dangerous question to ask without, sort of loaded.
Like what age should they get a phone? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like a phone in general, like that has internet capability, regardless of social media or not. Is there any studies or anything done that says, what would be a good appropriate age?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, I'll leave you so you can see the research yourself. If you go to the Source for Parents and you click on, well, I'll tell you what, let's go to the front page. I'll show you. I'm just clicking the front page. Right here, there's got these floating billboards here. They're going to go through there. And one of the billboards is sensible bare minimum screen limits. And let me click on it. One of the first questions it asks is delay screen ownership. And I give you link of all these different, basically all these different experts. And it seems like every single person who has done research on it and is looking at kids' brains and everything says wait till high school. Wait till high school. And here's one of the reasons. If somebody asks me, I say bare minimum 13. And the reason I say bare minimum 13 is, if not, the pressure's too great. If you give that 11-year-old or 12-year-old that phone, immediately they want to lie about their age to be on social media. because first thing they want is Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, the things that their friends have. So the pressure is on. That's why those researchers who all just finally agreed on something said, delay as long as possible, and tell school districts to start getting parents to agree. And one thing you guys can do as a church is start talking about, especially those of you guys who have younger kids, start saying, hey, let's our friend group, our Bible study, make a pact that none of us are going to give our kids, this device until high school or whatever. Now, I think you could make a mistake and wait till age 18, and I think that's a mistake as well, because I think then your kids are going to have to learn it on their own. But I would delay it till age 13 or 14. That's what most of the experts are saying. Somebody right now is thinking, but Jonathan, I already gave my 11-year-old a phone. Should I take it away? It's tricky. And I, depending on the kid, probably wouldn't take it away. That's like saying, hey, we're going to Disney World tomorrow, and getting there and going in the gate and being in there for 5 minutes and going, we're leaving. Your kids are going to hate you for the rest of their life. So now, do you just do stuff to be liked? No, but I think you can be shrewd about this. If you gave your 12-year-old a phone and you should have waited a year, one of the things you can do is you can do the same thing we've been talking about this whole time. You could start by talking about this. Hey, I just went to this workshop. Hey, I read this article. Hey, look at this study. What do you think about this? And talk to them. And they're like, I think I should be able to have my phone as long as I want. That's interesting, but you're wrong. No, and listen to them a little bit, talk to them about this. And then one thing you could do if you already gave your kid a phone is you could make it to where they can't download any. You could say, hey, no, you're not going to have social media because you're not going to lie about your age. You're 12 years old. It's against the law. So they have no social media. We're not going to have it in your bedroom at night. You can set it to where they can't download a thing on their phone. So basically you could render that phone almost social media-less, and they would have to come up to you, can I download Netflix? And be like, no. And again, don't make it a negative thing. Actually, no, I'd rather you just watch it with us on the big TV. So let's not do that, and you could say no on all that dangerous stuff on their phone. So I wouldn't actually take that phone away from that 12-year-old. I would just render it to be basically a texting and phone machine by blocking all that stuff off. It's kind of a shrewd way that a parent would disable it. And then if they're like, well, I want social media, when can I get social media? If it's your son, when we get done with this book. If it's your daughter, when we get done with this book, and talk with them about it, and then slowly open it up. So wait till high school if possible. If you already gave it to them, block everything until they get mature enough to start making these decisions. Think of it like a car. If your 11-year-old came up and said, could I drive? You're not just going to throw them the keys to the Jeep. You're going to say, well, actually, no, you got to wait till you're 16 and you got to take a test and the phone's the same way. And you can start using that rhetoric with your kids. Is that a small help?
Yeah, I know for us, our 11-year-old has a phone, and that was one of the things we did with him.
Bad parent.
I know, I just kicked me
Not
off
at all.
the Zoom, man. But that's what we did with ours. We took Safari off. So he can't download any. You can have 3 apps at a time, and those have to be approved. Wow. And so those are games. And so he's got Roblox and Fortnite on his. Actually, I don't think he has Fortnite. Anyways, it's it's limited. So yeah, that's good. I like that.
That's good. That's a great idea. Yeah. I mean, a lot of experts are saying wait, but some parents have given their phones early, and if you do, I would just really be aware and be aware of, again, remember that every expert out there is saying delay social media as long as possible, for specifically if you've got girls, monitor the amount of time you're spending on it. So keep that stuff to heart. And again, we don't want to be that drill sergeant or that disciplinarian, but if we set some of these really helpful boundaries, like no phone in the bedroom, no tech at the table, you're constantly, talking about this stuff, keep it, hopefully that's some of those things you'll be able to monitor with your kids. So, hey, I hope this was helpful. I'm glad we spent some extra time on Q&A. Here's a cool thing. If you guys actually go to thesourceforparents.com, one of the things you see here is there is a contact button. You hit that contact button, I actually get those emails and I actually answer them. There's also this button right here that says subscribe, and you can subscribe to all that kind of stuff, and you could get the free parenting help emails. You can get all that. And the other thing is jump on Amazon Smile and look at my page there, and you can get all kinds of help there. But That way I can answer your questions and constantly give you those free resources. And a lot of parents have found those books to be a big help. So I hope that helps. Travis, I'll let you close this out, man.
Yeah, listen, Jonathan, thank you for that. And I know, listen, guys, he's not just giving wisdom, but he's a guy who loves Jesus and has been working with students for a long time. And so this is coming from a place of a kingdom mindset. So I'm one of the reasons why I brought Jonathan in for all of us is because like this book has been huge. We made Hannah read this before she got Instagram. That's one of the rules that she had to do that. And so we were literally doing that exact same thing with her. And by the way, we have this in the resource center. We're opening up the resource center. The church isn't open yet, but if you want to come in on Wednesdays, we have this here, or you can just have it delivered to your house. So that's easier using that link we just put in chat. And that's real. This one's really good. The Guy's Guide to God, Girls in the Phone in Your Pocket. And this is really good. A lot of practical, very funny stuff. So it's not going to be tough for your kid to read. When you tell them there's like 100 chapters, they freak out. Then they find out the chapter is that long. That's the chapter, is chapter 42. Anyways, go find those books, find those resources, subscribe to the email list, and actually read them, because it's valuable. So yeah, go buy those books, get wise. And Jonathan, thank you so much, man. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this and helping us out with our kids.
My pleasure. I appreciate chatting with all of y'all. And let me think, for you guys, it's 8 something. For me, it's dinner time. I get to go eat dinner now.
Some of us still need to, I guess. Hey, thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it. Thank you, parents.
Glad to be here, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
All right. I would say we'll see you guys on Sunday, but it'll be virtual, so I guess not. See you somewhere someday. Bye, guys.